Welcome to the Sparky Coach podcast. This platform was built by Sparkies for Sparkies. We simply exist to make business owners more profitable, or businesses more profitable and more predictable. So we want to work with people that work hard because we love working hard too, that work smart because you got to be on top of the business, people that are kind because no one likes a dickhead. Am I right? People who want results because that's what we're here for, right? And people who want to be part of a like-minded community. So if you're interested in hearing more about the platform, please reach out and enjoy the podcast. All right, welcome to the Crowe Show. Today we're going to go through all the key metrics you sort of be looking at on close a month. So all the key numbers, metrics, that is. Plenty of other metrics to look at as well besides the numbers. I think it all starts with the numbers and it goes downstream from there. Where, you know, our philosophy, like make money, build wealth, be kind. We are massive believers that everyone should be taking a market wage. So in other words, what you could be replaced for $3 down the road. Maybe it's 100 grand on the tools, maybe 110, maybe it's 120 to 150 in the office, plus super, plus a car. So what are you worth on wages? Huge question to ask yourself here, but are you performing? It's like, that's a big question. And then we believe your business should be giving you a net profit between 20 and 35%. So it's basically hijacking. You want to hijack everything. I know there's all this like, do you do a price book or do you do hourly rate and what's your charge out rate and what's this? And that's all good and noble discussions, but everything comes back to a close a month. Everything comes back to a net profit. And shout out to, I don't want to name him, but this is a good conversation. I was challenged the other day by someone who called up and they were like, oh, hey, you're always rubbishing people on a revenue only metric or a revenue metric, but you talk about a net profit between 20 and 35%. Now, the only thing that gives that net profit context is the revenue. So isn't revenue a key metric? And I was like, yeah, it's 100%. It's a valid point. It's a good point. It's a great point. And I think what I'm against is a revenue only metric. When revenue is the only indicator, or when even gross profit is the only indicator, things can go wrong. And when net profit's the only indicator, things can still go wrong in there as well. So you need holistically the pathway. So I'm going to show you today the pathway, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. So go with me here. This session, 100% you can sort of listen to, and you can watch it. I'm going to share screen and show sort of some things we're looking for, and yeah, follow along. And here we go. This is actually the first time I've shared screen on this Riverside app. Here we go. Give me a second, and bang it out there. All right, got my screen there. So this is a this is like an ultimate best case scenario. Like you're never going to get this, but go with me here. So essentially, you see in July we've got 100 grand of revenue, and it just goes up 100 grand until we hit 1.2 million. And I say that to say, you know, as your revenue goes up, your net profit should go up as well. Now, this might seem very, very simple and obvious, but 20% of a higher number is a higher number. If you're on 20% net profit of 100 grand, your net profit's 20 grand. If you're 20% of 1.2 million, then your net profit's 240 grand. This is per month. We're going off a monthly calculator, and everything comes and totals up to the bottom. So it's really interesting, but 20% of a higher number is a higher number. Now we're shooting for 20 to 35% net profit, which I think is incredibly fair and reasonable. And there's gonna be a few parameters that affect that a little bit, like are you on the tools still? If you're on the tools still, you're keeping a large portion of the wage component. You're keeping the wage, the super component, and you're keeping the business profit component, or the business is, and you're a weapon on the tools. You're sent down from heaven, blessed by the trade gods to be carrying a pair of pliers, and you are just an absolute weapon. And you're performing, so the net profit can be higher when you get those business owners still on the tools. But the key metric is obviously, we're looking across here at our net profit. Now, what gives us our net profit? Sometimes you got to go backwards to go forwards. You're looking at holistically, we're going to start from left to right. You got your revenue metric. So revenue metric is basically what's coming in. So it's basically what you build for. Now, this is just so critical to be like, when you close a month, all your invoices have to go out and all your wholesaler bills or supplier bills or subcontracting bills have to be dated, and to give yourself a good context of what's going on in this month. Now, interesting thing to note, yes, revenue is just like what's coming in. You should have a good gauge of what you think should be coming in, but revenue is so unbelievably subjective to go as a standalone metric. So what gives it, from left to right, what happens? So you got your revenue, which what money comes in. Then you got your cost of sales or cost of goods sold. Now, in a trade world, what are you selling? You're selling labor and materials. So cost of goods sold is going to be your billable labor and materials and subcontractors, basically anything that you're selling. Now, you can also go project management, admin management, if you're able to on-cost those things, but anything you're selling in here, usually the most common, especially trade world, is billable labor and materials and subcontractors. And maybe there's plant equipment if you're renting your digger out and all this kind of stuff, but basically anything you're selling. So the whole goal, you know the rhythm. Your goal is to buy labor materials and sell at a profit. So coming into cost of sales, and this is interesting, but like you've really got to make sure, obviously your gross profit, we say anything between 35% plus. What's a good margin? More is always the answer. More is always the answer. But what's a good margin? More. But typically gross profit should be 35% and north of that. It really comes down to how effective you can run and how efficient you can run your business. If your operating expenses are low, you can push like not too dissimilar. I'll get into that in a second. But you can imagine, even from just the two conversations we've just had then, revenue is subjective to what comes in that month. And it's so important that you get your bills out every single month, your variations bills, your progress claims, all your weekly invoices need to come out. The cost of sales, the materials per month move is like, there's so much subjectivity here. Are we buying switchboards for the following months? How am I positioned in there? Is my chart of accounts set up properly? If you are full-time office, but you're in here as a wage, then you need to move yourself over to cost of ops, which is non-billable wages and operating expenses, basically administration wages, operations manager wages, anything in the office non-billable, and everything like warehouse, all that kind of stuff sits over in this portion. Now, on this as well, the other subjectivity you get is if people aren't paying themselves a market wage and they're just volunteering to the business, you're not going to get a good read here. So we really need to go back to the beginning of your chart of accounts and make sure that everything is in order, because you can see a slight miscue is going to absolutely cook it. Now you can see I've set up pretty typically a 35% average and a 20% average. Most people's close a month will be a little bit roller coaster. There'll be some sort of typical, but it's going to be a little bit up and down. So we want to make sure that everyone's is in order to the best it can be. So we want to basically, if you're paying yourself heaps over here, we want to strip you out and put you back in at market value. And if you're not paying yourself anything or paying yourself little, we want to strip you out and put you back in at market value, because that's going to give us a correct read on gross profit. Now, typically, when you think gross profit, think revenue less cost of goods sold gives us your gross profit. Now, your indication is 35% and north. I'm talking Sparky businesses here, aircon, solar kind of thing. But like, interesting thing fire, there's so many, you could take this conversation so many places. Electrically, you're typically moving 70% labor, 30% materials, where aircon, solar, you're moving 70% materials, 30% labor on average, holistically. And you've just got to think like net profit per hour across solar and aircon, just that's the metric you want to look for. So a lot of the times solar, aircon will be moving more revenue, but their cost of goods sold will be higher because they're moving more materials. And more materials, obviously, we're selling it. We want to include that in the cost of goods sold. But once again, if you've got an electrical business on 100 grand, at 20%, you're making 20 grand. If solar business or aircon business might be between 200 and 300, 20% of a higher number is a higher number, they might be able to be profiting 40 grand instead of 20 just because of their material shift and materials move. Basically, what's happening is you're moving a large amount of materials or a larger amount of materials with a margin on it across the same or similar amount of hours. So more materials across a lower amount of hours at the same profit percentage will result in a higher net profit per hour or gross profit per hour. Super interesting stuff. That's probably a session in itself, to be honest. But you can imagine that gross profit typically, if it's revenue, and in terms of what's coming in, less cost of goods sold, gross profit's going to give you the best indicator of, are we pricing properly? Are we quoting properly? Because gross is just literally the exchange between what's coming in and what's billable going out. So what am I getting in revenue versus what I'm paying out in billable labor, materials, and subcontractors, basically anything that's on-costable. So your gross profit is going to be your absolute Bible in terms of, am I quoting and handling and pricing effectively and efficiently? Now, even that sentence alone opens up many, many cans of worms, right? So am I pricing properly? Now, your prices can be correct, but your handling can be incorrect. We've all quoted a job properly and handled it poorly, right? Whether that's through a lack of documentation or quoting off revision C instead of revision D, or whether that's having the right clients and the right jobs but the wrong people on them, or whether that's not crediting materials back to that current job, to that job or whatever, or whether it's over purchasing materials, or whether it's not allowing enough materials. There's so many moving parts between revenue and cost of goods sold that alone you should be dialing that in. This is the importance of like measuring every single job. I want to come back to that before we get through here. But you can kind of see gross profit is the best indicator of how you're pricing and handling. It's the best indicator because you bet as long as everything's dated correctly, over time, over 6 to 12 months will give you a really good read. And as long as everything is associated properly in your chart of account, so your cost of goods sold includes you at the market and everything is organized in order. Now, the interesting thing about gross profit is obviously it's the best indicator of quoting. And then as we keep moving downstream, we look at other revenue. Other revenue is sort of like an apprentice grant, did you sell a car, and all that sort of stuff, like anything extracurricular that's come through, and that's just basically like a non-typical revenue amount. Cost of operating is huge. This includes our operating expenses. When I say operating expenses, I mean any subscriptions you have, job management software, your vehicles, your registration, your like basically anything it costs to run your business, accounting, bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff, plus your non-billable. So anyone that's in the office should be and cost of operating the business. Now, the interesting thing I want to go through here, and I'm going to take you across a couple of examples, but cost of ops also includes the two main variables for me are advertising. Now, advertising, I'm not saying advertising is not an expense. Of course, advertising expense, but some people need it and some people don't. Now, the danger of only going off a gross profit metric is you've got no idea of how much it costs to get that. If you've got someone that doesn't advertise and they're on a 35% gross, they might be hitting a 20% net. If you've got someone that has to spend a lot of money advertising, that 35% gross might turn into a 10 to 15% net profit or a 5 to 10% net profit. Now, on this, a typical major coaching move is to only go off gross profit or revenue. Revenue is the most dramatic because it essentially, it's like, oh, you're doing 100 grand months, 200 grand months, 300 grand months. And that's great. But revenue with no context to what's been sold or cost of operations is actually just, it doesn't mean anything. So the only thing that gives revenue metric, as this is revenue, its metric, is as we go sort of right to left or left to right across this thing, or right to left backwards. Either way, it does the same thing. So it's super interesting. So advertising is like, if you're spending a lot of money advertising, or if your business model needs to employ salespeople to go out and sell the product, or if your business model requires 3 admins and 2 virtual assistants and 1 operations manager, you might eat away what's been earned in the gross by a poor operating. So it's actually really interesting to reference. You need the holistic. You need the revenue, what's coming in. You need the cost of goods sold, which is anything billable, pretty much. That gives you your gross. But gross profit is the set up properly. Gross profit is the best indicator, but it's not what you're left with. Net profit's what you're left with. Now, across here, obviously you've got the advertising metric, which is kind of like some people need it, some people don't. And obviously you've got the lean and mean businesses as well. So I've seen some people operating so unbelievably lean and mean. And what they can achieve a lower hourly rate because their cost of operating is really low. Now, if you think holistically, I'm going to go through across, where are we? I'll just basically, you know what, I'll just tell you. Basically, if you think holistically across an hourly rate, what is an hourly rate? An hourly rate is basically how do you get to that point if you charge $120, $150, $100 an hour, whatever. You get your wage component in terms of what's market wage. Let's say it's $45 an hour plus super. Let's just say it's 50 for math purposes, plus your operating expenses, which is basically essentially your operating expenses is your overhead cost per billable resource. Your overhead cost per billable resource is basically you get all your operating expenses and non-billables put in a pool and divided by how many hours you do, and it gives you overhead cost per billable resource. Now, if you're running low administration and low operating expenses, you might have, I've seen people have like a $20 an hour overhead. I've seen people with a $70 an hour overhead. So if your base level, including wage and super, is 50 and you plus 20 to that, my break even is 70. If I go 50 plus 70, that's 120. So I've seen break evens range between 70 and 120. Now, there's no right or wrong, although there is typicals. Now, you can move those needles by moving more hours across, or by reducing your administration expenses, or by increasing your efficiencies in the office. Or there's multiple ways to sort of skin the cat, adding apprentices as long as they're billable. So you can't really manipulate it. You can manufacture an overhead cost per billable resource or overhead per hour per billable resource. You can manufacture that within a rhyme or a reason, but you are certainly stuck in some typical worlds. Now, if you came to me in the middle of the night and said, Crowe, what's my overhead? Generally speaking, if you're a team of under 5, I'd say you'd want to be $35 an hour, give or take 10 to 15%. If you had a factory, $45 an hour, give or take 10 to 15%. If you were strictly service and maintenance, I'd probably say $55, give or take 10 to 15%. And that's a huge playing field. And you've got to understand where you sit on that field. It's no good just to talk about revenue metrics and gross profit metrics without a net profit. Essentially, net is the only thing you're keeping at the end of the day. Now, the other interesting thing is here with the net profit is sacrificing. Like if your cost of ops includes an administration or operations manager and you're sort of training them, it might be really high for a portion of time because we're investing back into the business. So something calculators sort of don't measure, which is why you see we keep general notes on the right-hand side. Calculators don't measure growth stages of the business very well, and they also they typically don't reference misquoted jobs very well. That's why we need to keep. There's a spreadsheet that will tell you a number, but we want to know how we get to that number. So if you're sinking heavily into a factory and an operations manager, your overhead per hour might be incredibly high, but you might not be able to on-cost that. So you might sacrifice some short-term pain, in other words, some short-term lower net profit, but for the long-term goal of growing into a higher revenue, a higher revenue at the same net profit is essentially more money. So referencing this guy or girl, they're doing 100 grand revenue and their net profit is 20%, which is 20 grand. Then they're doing a 500 grand revenue. This is per month. And their net profit is 100 grand per month. So same net profit percentage, a higher number, because 20% of a higher number is a higher number. Typically, that plays into what I was saying before with a net profit per hour. 20% of a higher number is a higher number. Aircon and solar people are so interesting because they can sort of make really good money off of 15 to 20% net, but solely because they're moving a large amount of materials across a shorter amount of hours. And obviously on top of that, the more materials you move, generally speaking, the cheaper you get them. So you're sort of double dipping. You're moving a lot, and then you're also able to hassle and haggle with the manufacturers to drop their pants, drop their price. So you basically, your purchasing power goes up. So when your purchasing power improves, what you're buying the same thing for less money. And if you're buying the same thing for less money, then guess what? Gross profit up, net profit up, more money to either keep or reinvest back into the business. So left to right, you're always looking holistically. 1 to 3 months is going to tell you next to nothing, to be fair. I've sat with someone who's pushing really, 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 really bad months at the moment. And it's literally because if you just pictured, say, this guy, let's say this guy's in revenue 100 grand, and let's say he's misquoted a job 2 years ago, and he's still sending labor and materials to a job, well, misread that. He's still sending labor materials to a job where he's exhausted his progress claims. So in this case, his cost of sales or cost of goods sold exceeds his revenue, so his gross and net is down. Now, this is really interesting to talk about, but like if you look at this, if you look at him right now, it's like, whoa, you need to turn this whole thing around. The sad reality is everything he's doing from now into the future, everything he's doing from now, or even from 12 months ago, is working. He's just stuck sending labor and materials to a job where he's exhausted his progress allocations. So the pie has been eaten. There's nothing left to claim, but he's still got to send labor materials back there. Now, this is the danger of doing larger jobs. Now, not every builder is a dickhead. Not every larger client is a dickhead. It just might be the fact that there's way more room for error in a larger job. Now, if you're moving 400 hours of work through your company, you're at a 1%, basically, let's say 10% mistake rate, you might have 40 hours. So 1% is 4 hours of mistakes. If you're moving 40 hours of labor through you at a mistake rate of 1%, it's 0.4 hours. So your mistake rate over hours, as your hours increase, your mistake rate increases. And as your hours increase, the chances for things to go wrong increase as well. Now, if you've got a busy business owner quoting to their weapon ability on the tools and quoting to like the time they could get it done in and their effectiveness and efficiency and going to manage these 3 people and everything's going to be dialed and organized, if they're quoting to that, you can get exposed very, very quickly, because as you grow the business, typically what's going to happen is people aren't you, and they'll do things a little bit slower, a little bit less cost effective, a little bit less efficient with a little bit more mistakes. So growing the business can be an absolute nightmare if not organized and managed properly. But coming back into what I was going to get to before, if you look, I will share the screen actually. If you look at this, right? Okay, here we go. If you looked at this back here, and that's my example of someone, let's just say they have a couple of months about that, 220, you can really see how like everything they're doing might work from the future, but you're stuck behind for a little bit. So you really got to make sure that you never get stuck behind. You really don't want to make a mistake quoting. Might I add here, you don't have to make a mistake quoting. You don't have to do something you're uncomfortable with, and you don't have to make a mistake from here on in. It's very, very critical that you understand that. You don't have to do a job that's way too out of your league that you've got no idea about. This is where our program comes into it with help desk, and we help people quote, and we've got price book examples and quote checkers and mini quote checkers, all this kind of stuff to basically make sure that you avoid making mistakes, that the amount you send through is something that you can do the job for and you can do it for well. But essentially the simplicity of a left to right is you should be buying labor and materials and selling it at a profit. So if you're buying it here and you're buying it here and you're selling it at a profit. So the close of month will tell you exactly where you are hitting the metric or not hitting the metric. Now, coming into this, I got to ask this question. I did a similar session at our live event, sort of impromptu, and I got asked sort of thing, well, what do I do? If my net profit's out, what do I typically do? And if you look left to right, basically, you that's what you have to do. You have to go like, what's bringing in the revenue? what is revenue? Revenue is just the jobs are completed that month, really. So if you want to improve your net profit, you basically have to go back through your cost of operations, check their efficiencies, forget other revenue because that's not typical. You go back through cost of goods sold and you land over here. And revenue is just a whole bunch of jobs completed over that month. So you need to go back to the individual jobs. This is why we talk about close in the week. Close in the week is checking every single individual job for gross profit and net profit. It's no good just to piss in the wind and leave everything to chance. I promise you, if I showed you our best performing clients' calculators, you are going to see some reds, some oranges, and some greens across the week. That's just what's going to happen. The people that are checking this stuff, checking every single job, are still making mistakes. And that's because you're moving labor and materials, which is relatively subjective to quoting to an extent, subjecting to handling to an extent, way more handling than quoting. But even the other day, one of our best clients, we measured this job and he lost, I think it was a 9 or 10%. So basically down 10% on a 20 grand job. Now, what happened? It's like, the client called and they wanted it done for, 20 grand. And I said, yes, it was in front of my computer. It's like, you got an elite, high performing person making mistakes. And this is with consistent checking. So if you want to basically improve your net profit, you want to just more revenue, go back to what brings in the revenue. What brings in revenue? It's the cost of goods sold, basically, what you're buying and selling day to day, week to week, hour to hour. So you're buying labor hours and materials and you sell at a profit. So I guarantee you, even on these 10 good months, there's jobs that are going incredibly poorly, there's jobs that are going incredibly well, and there's jobs that are going okay. So if we're pulling out and getting some context into what's working, let's keep that. Can we improve it? What's not working? What should we do about that? Do we need to stop it or change it? Now, the interesting metric here is as you get to 500 grand in revenue, which is basically $6 million a year in revenue, let's call it $5 million in revenue. If you're fighting for 1%, you're fighting for $50,000 to $60,000. If you're on $1 million revenue and you're fighting for 1% to 2%, you're fighting for $10,000 to $20,000 additional a year. So double checking things is the most useful portion of your time. It's absolutely crazy not to. So if you want to improve left to right, you got to go back to, it's not pre-revenue, but you know what I'm saying? It kind of is. It's basically, there's 3 stages to every job, right? There's what you think you can do it for, which is the quote, I reckon I can do it for this. Then there's the handling of, and then there's the back costing. Now, the back costing just references the first 2. Did I get the quote wrong? Did I miss any variations? And how did I handle the job? Did it handle how I thought? Did it go how I wanted it to? Was there any curveball? So I hit it with the right crew. Did the materials cost me more than I thought? If you look at it holistically in this left to right format, in this linear format, there's not too much that can go wrong. Did I buy the cost of goods? Did I buy everything for too much? And did it cost me too much to deliver? It's pretty much left to right. Like it's actually quite simple. Most of us just need to pull ourselves back and look at it and be like, okay, what happened? Now coming into here, I've given you some typical examples and you can kind of see what I'm sort of doing here. This revenue I've set up top to bottom at 100 grand. This person's doing about $1.2 million a year. So you see, this is why you can't go off a revenue metric only. You can see there's too many variables across it. So I've sort of dumbed up this. This is actually really interesting. If you see the top 3, I've got a 65 grand cost of sales, 75 and an 85. So you can move the same revenue, but the only thing that gives your gross profit context is, did it cost me, what did it cost me to deliver that? What did it cost me? What do the cost of goods sold add up to? What did my billable labor and materials add up to? So if you moved, this person might have moved a big switchboard, this September person. So you're 100 grand in revenue, just got, well, yeah, revenue sounded good, but hey, you know what? We just moved a 20 grand switchboard that month. So it looks good, but it's not good. It looks productive on the revenue, but the cost of goods sold was 85 grand, so it's 15%. I'm going to be losing money at that point. So you look at it that way and be like, well, the only thing that gives gross profit context between revenue is the cost of goods sold. So making sure that's correct. Now, the other thing, like I was saying before, is your cost of operating. How much is your cost of how much is your business costing to operate? That's basically anything non-billable, administration expenses, you in the office, operating managers expenses, anything to do with subscriptions, basically all your operating expenses, your vehicles, your 5-year replacement items, your screens, your staff members' screens, your iPads on the field, your petrol at the moment, big topic at the moment, all this kind of stuff, on-road costs, all this. So even on that, it's subjective. And we've got to make sure that you're not on-costing something that shouldn't be on-costed there. So a lot of people are like, oh, I pay my partner a wage. Cool, I don't really care. This is a market value cat. We'll strip them out and we'll add them back in at market value if they even need to be there at all. If you've got an incorrect operating expenses, does your partner's car need to be on-costed to your client? The answer is no, unless they are a fully fledged member of your staff. But it's so interesting to you've got to get these numbers right. If you get them wrong, you can on-cost an amount that's actually incorrect. If you're on-costing an amount that's incorrect, you can either be charging too much and you risk losing clients, or you're charging too little and you're not making any money. And they're both as bad as each other, in my opinion. So you look at this and you see this cost of operation. This person's running a fairly lean and mean business. And this person down here on the 25 grand might be advertising, or they're double handling some operations managers expenses, or they're admin training, or they are basically, I think the big ticket item is administration, or the big ticket item is advertising, or they're employing social media managers and 3 VAs and all this kind of stuff. And this is why you can't just go on gross profit, because you need to know what it's costing you back end. What's all the non-billable expenses? What's my business costing to operate? And you can kind of see that 100 grand up here at our typicals of 35 and 20, yeah, we're making good money. But come down here, see this one here in October, the gross profit's still 35%, but it's costing me more in the office. I might have salespeople driving from job to job, selling switchboard upgrades, or like reaching out on a business to business for builders, or I'm paying a lot of money in advertising. And that's all good, but I've gone from 20% to 10% because it's costing me more to operate than another person. And this is why you can't really compare hourly rates, and you can't really stack one up against the other. You can, in a nutshell, in a realm of reason, and there's a realm of normalcy, but everyone is so unbelievably different. And you can see this person's moving the same revenue. I got a different cost of sales and a different cost of operating, and all our net profits are different, totaling at 8%. So it's really not like it's a black and white science in a way. Closing the month, it seems like face value, black and white sale. Like, what did I bring in, and what am I left with? What did I bring in and what am I left with? So if you look at it in terms of what I'm left with, that can you can either be encouraged by that or discouraged by that. But if you're encouraged by that, can we go back up the food chain and work out what's going good and what's not going so good, and how do we improve it? How do we get an extra 2 to 5%, 10% net profit? If it's not going good, we go back up the food chain and be like, where is it broken? Now, the most interesting thing is, for me, if you turn up to a switchboard upgrade, a fault find, you'll be able to figure it out. You'll be able to be like, there's, it starts with the power coming in and it ends at the outlet. Where is a break? And you've got a series of pathway that's trained in your head, a linear pathway to be like, okay, I'll start here and then I'll progress through to here and I will find the issue. Why? Because there has to be an issue. Why? Because it's electrical. It's fact-based operating. There's power there or there's not there. And if there's power there, there's a reason. And if there's no power there, there's a reason. That's why electrical is so good. People are different. People are subjective. But net profit is the same thing. If you look at it and be like, is that working? Net profit, no. Okay, let's go back. Where is it broken? Is it broken in the operating expenses? Is it broken in the cost of goods sold? Is it broken in the revenue? Is it broken in the individual job? Of those individual jobs, where is it broken? So if you can kind of see it like a left to right pathway, and you can compartmentalize your brain into being thinking like, not into being emotional and being like, I need to fix this. Being like, okay, well, there's an issue. Then we need to work out why there's an issue. That's it. And once we work out why, which always starts at individual job measuring, we can get some progress and some momentum. And if you start with the numbers, and if your goal is, I want to achieve a market wage with a net profit of 20 to 35%, if that's your goal, that's your holistic goal, then that's the benchmark. And then what does that bring up? If we're not hitting that, what do we need to improve? I need to improve my job management software, how we're using purchase orders, how we're capturing timesheets, how we're capturing job notes, how we're collecting purchase orders, where we're purchasing it from, how much we're purchasing this gear from. If I carry an extra apprentice to that job, the training of my tradies and apprentices, if that person needs to be a spotter or not, if I need to hire or not, how's the schedule looking? How's my business operating the administration world effectively? Do I need to hire an administration assistant? Do I need to hire an operations manager? Do I need to advertise? Do I need to pull that back? Do I need to ramp it in? Do I need to pull it back? Where do I need to sit on that whole thing? Do I need to be out of balance for a season to get back in balance in the future? So if I had one thing to wrap it up and one thing only, it's like it's a linear pathway. It's just fault finding. That's all you're doing. Start on the bottom and now we're here. How do we get here? Let's go back and sort of work this out. My whole encouragement to you is this is your race. This is not someone else's business. This is your business. This is your life and livelihood. This is something that you will either sell or scale or keep generation to generation. There's no right or wrong in that. But there is a right and wrong in consistent net profit. So it's like if you're looking at bad net profit for 12 to 18 months, something's wrong. And if you can't articulate why it's wrong, you need to go back to the beginning, back to the basics and being like, what are we buying this for? And what are we selling it for? And how can I get better? Because it's no good just to bury your head in the sand and check this stuff every 12 months when your accountant sends you a message in May, hey, can we catch up? I want to tell you how the year's gone. It's no good with that kind of stuff. You've got to dial this in and you've got to dial yourself in. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you sure as hell need to start to know, you need to start to change that because you need to know what you're looking for and what you're looking at. So that's a bit of a close a month example between gross and net and revenue and some key metrics and what to look for and what not to look for. So if you need any more information, please just reach out anytime. We are Sparky Coach. This is the Crowe Show. Peace. That's a wrap on another podcast. Whatever you're doing, don't be too busy to stop and check if you're making money. And above all else, you know the rules. Be kind. See you soon.